Our theme for this period of time is stuck in the middle with you. And our theme graphic is interesting because the start of the phrase is quite muddled up, the first couple of words, and then towards the middle of the phrase, which is actually the words the middle, things start to become clearer, and then by the end of the phrase, with you, things are clearer. Things are clearer. Towards the end of this collection of books that we call the Bible, right at the back is a letter. It's a letter called The Revelation. It's a letter written around about the end of the 1st century, around about AD 90, about 60 years after the life and the death and the resurrection of a man called Jesus of Nazareth. And in those 60 years, a movement has spread throughout the ancient Near East, throughout the known world, of his followers who are living out, they believe, what he is still doing in the world. And one of his followers calls himself John, has been such a vocal critic of the empire of the time that he's found himself quarantined, if you like, locked down, trapped. He's been put on an island to keep him quiet, but that was not going to keep him quiet because he can write. He can write letters, and he writes this letter. But this letter is itself a revelation. It's a revealing, it's an uncovering of not just some facts, but actually of a person, an experience he has of the risen Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth, but not the Jesus of Nazareth from 60 years ago, the Jesus of Nazareth of now. This particular message that we're reading in chapter 2 is to a place called Thyatira. Now, Thyatira was one of the smallest places that is being written to, but it is notorious for a few different things. It's famous for being at a major intersection of a lot of trade routes, and that meant there was a whole lot of trade going on in the city. And that required something known as trade guilds. Trade guilds are member organisations that protect that particular trade and protect the interests and help the profits of that particular trade. So things like leather working and cloth and linen, copper and bronze, and all sorts of different things, pottery. And each of these trade guilds had ways of protecting the interests. Usually that would also involve some sort of local god who would look after the trade, and there were certain things you would do to try and please that god to help your profits. One of the most famous gods of the area was Apollo Tyrmnaeus, and among other things, patron god of the bronze trade. Meanwhile, the whole business enterprise only operated within the Roman Empire. And the empire required you to behave in all sorts of different ways, but it also required you to buy into the way of commerce and economics and the whole system. And that involved usually their currency. And on the currency, you got the messages of what the empire was all about. And in particular, at this point, one of the big things that the empire was doing was encouraging you to worship the emperor, to worship the whole Roman way of life as a faith. And that was reinforced on the coins. Local coins would tell you about Apollo, and also the Roman coins would tell you about the Domitian and how he was the son of God, and you had to bow down and worship all of these to be part of what was going on. It's no accident then that as Jesus talks to this group of Jesus followers in Thyatira, and he has a message for them, he says, I am the one who have eyes like blazing fire and feet like burnished bronze, and I'm the one who is the Son of God. Son of God, to make the point that Domitian is not the Son of God. Feet of bronze, to remind them of their amazing story in a book called Daniel that gives them a huge amount of hope about one who is going to come and put things to rights and sort things out for God. And also to tell them that local trade gods like Apollo are meaningless, they're fake. He is the one, the risen one, the living one, who is going to help put things to rights. He then says what I believe, and I've said before, are some of the most helpful and comforting words in a situation of being trapped, of being under pressure, of feeling stuck in the middle of a terrible pressured situation where things aren't the way you think they should be. He says, I know. I know. Not I know because I've got CCTV watching your situation. Not I know because I've got spies in your midst, but I know because I am with you. The image that John has of Jesus is him standing in the middle of his followers, with them in the situation they're in, and also in the movement that is spreading and growing. What does he know? What does he know about them? What are they known for? That's a huge question that the West Church we like to come back to time and time again. What are we known for? What should we be known for. It's fascinating that what they're known for is love, faith, service, and perseverance. Love, because of course the story of the scriptures, the story of God, is a God who is love. And Jesus' life and death and resurrection was an example of God's love. And Jesus talked about how love was, at the end of the day, the only command: to love God and to love the people God puts you next to. And also the only test of what it means to live that out. Faith, the word faith in this situation is not about knowledge, but about trust. Trust in action, putting your active trust in a way of being in a God who is present and who has made you to be part of what he has intended for the whole of creation, which leads to service. That the whole story is about a God who is doing something in his world, who wants to bring it to flourishing, who wants to bring life, and who has created partners within that, made to serve each other. And the situation they are in requires perseverance in that long, slow journey and movement. And he's encouraging them in all of these things. This is what they're known for. In fact, they're doing more of them than they were in the past. But it's not all encouragement. Like any good coach, Jesus praises what is good, and then he suggests corrections for what is lacking. And here he says a real issue with a kind of thinking and acting. And the nickname that is given by John and Jesus for what's happening here and what a leader is doing is Jezebel. Now this it's not her name. We're not even sure whether the leader is male or female. But a leader is claiming to have a message from God, which is what a prophet does, that is saying you can do basically what you like. That you can just take part in the practices of the people around about you. The empire, yeah, you have to be part of the empire, so just do what the empire says. Doesn't matter, you're a Jesus follower at the end of the day, and you can do what you like. And also the trade guilds, you need to be involved in what they're doing. You need to use their coins, you need to take part in their feasts, and sometimes the food in those feasts has been sacrificed to idols, and who knows, you might have to actually go and take part in the temple rituals that might involve prostitutes, and you might have to just take part in all sorts of things, and that's fine, because at the end of the day you can still call yourself a Jesus follower. And the nickname Jezebel reminds the Jewish listeners in particular who are hearing this of a story from their scriptures of the wife of King Ahab, who was called Jezebel, and who famously tempted and seduced the Israelite people away from worshipping the living God and towards worshipping the destructive god Baal. We shouldn't get too tied up in details here because there's a lot of metaphors going on, but the main things that are being talked about are destructive behaviour, immorality basically, and unfaithfulness, idolatry, choosing other gods more than the living God, the God of creation, the God who saved him from slavery, the God who is acting to bring the world back to the way it was created to be. The image throughout the scriptures has been of a God who wants partners, who wants a relationship, who creates human beings to be part of that, and it's like a marriage between God and his people. And so often his people are unfaithful and go off after destructive behaviours or go off after other gods who promise all sorts of things. And God, he remains faithful and is patient and is hurting and eventually hopes that the people will come back time and time and time again. And this is the imagery that's being used here. Jesus is harsh, is shocking, and he uses extreme words in what he's saying here because he wants to provoke a reaction. And so we have images of being thrown on a bed, of suffering, of even death. And this is less maybe about the details, as I said, and more about, because he's using images from all over the scriptures about how God deals with evil and destructive behaviour and allows certain consequences to happening, that the consequences of destructive choices and the consequences of chasing after other gods are going to be suffering and eventually death. Jesus then reminds this group of people as he challenges them that God is a God who knows, who searches, well, the English here says who searches hearts and minds. But what it actually says in the Greek and the Hebrew, it says searches kidneys and hearts. That God searches kidneys and hearts. In the ancient Near East, your kidneys were symbolic of your emotions, and your heart was where your will, your mind, your choices were. So it is hearts and minds in another way, but kidneys and hearts are a particularly vivid image. God is the one who knows our hearts and our minds, and God is the one who repays each according to his deeds. Not a God who makes you, gives you a prize if you behave or punishes you if you misbehave, but a God who sorts things out, who brings justice, who puts things to rights. And that involves, if that involves destructive consequences, then that's something that people have got themselves mixed up, and that is going to be painful. But that's about consequences. That's not about reward and punishment. What does he ask them to do? Does he ask them to shout out judgment? Does he ask them to smash something? Does he ask them to attack what is going on? Or perhaps this leader? What Jesus commands the group of Jesus followers in Thyatira is to hold on. To hold on to what they have until he comes to sort things out. And what is it that they have to hold on to? Love, service, faith, and perseverance. They're asked to hold on, and then to persevere and to overcome. And to those who overcome, they will then inherit, they will be given authority over the nations, which sounds amazing, sounds great to become rulers. But of course, this is all part of the big story, and it was right there, right at the very beginning in the original and poem, right at the start of a book called Genesis, which is about what the whole creation is all about. It says that God made human beings to partner with him in dominion, in rule. But the word actually means to love and to protect and to care and to bring to flourishing. To rule is to have the awesome privilege and responsibility of looking after something. In their Israelite story, one of their most famous kings was the king Solomon. And he's visited by the Queen of Sheba at one point, and she famously reflects back his wisdom and is amazed by all the riches he has, but also says, how blessed are Israel, because they have you to maintain justice and righteousness, because that is the job of a ruler, to look after the place. The image that we have, and there's lots of images here taken from, particularly from a psalm called, Psalm 2, where this Jesus figure then uses these images of iron rods and about things being smashed to pieces. But the iron rod in the picture is the iron rod that was used by a shepherd to protect the sheep, not the ceremonial rod that a king would use to wave around and tell people that they were poor subjects. This is about ruling in a way that means protecting and taking care of. That's what we inherit as we become the people God made us to be. Jesus talked about the meek inheriting the earth in a set of teaching on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, where he talked about hungering for righteousness. The final part of Jesus' message is just a reminder that he is, as he said at the start, standing in their midst. He is with them. He is the morning star, which is the reference that's given. It's also a reference to Venus. Venus in the ancient Near World, Venus in reality, is one of the brightest stars in the sky that can be seen at the darkest times, and is a reminder that the dawn is coming if we would hold on. Jesus calls them to hold on. He praises him for the things they have to hold on to, for love, for faith, for service, and for perseverance. And he reminds them that he is with them and they should keep holding on. Let us hold that in our kidneys and our hearts.